The mess hall of the Coalition base on Kepler 442b buzzed with alien chatter. Soldiers from a dozen different species sat together, their various appendages wrapped around drinking vessels filled with intoxicating liquids from their home worlds. The topic of conversation, as it often was these days, centered on the newest addition to their unit. Marcus Chen sat alone in the corner, methodically cleaning his rifle. The human's presence had become a source of amusement for the other soldiers. While they boasted of their kills and shared war stories with animated gestures, Chen remained silent, focused entirely on maintaining his weapon. "Look at the human," laughed Zartek, a massive Krillian warrior whose forearms could each bench press a small vehicle. His purple scales rippled with amusement. "Always polishing that primitive projectile weapon. Doesn't even have plasma capabilities." The table erupted in laughter. Thixar, a serpentine voidwalker, coiled tighter on his seat. "I heard humans need those ancient weapons because their reflexes are too slow for energy weapons. Chemical propulsion. Can you imagine?" "Chemical propulsion is so outdated," added Grix, a silicon-based crystalline whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns. "My people abandoned such primitive technology 3,000 cycles ago. We use focused light beams that travel at, well, light speed." More laughter filled the air. Chen continued cleaning his rifle, showing no sign he heard their mockery. His weathered face remained impassive, gray eyes focused on the task at hand. He wore standard Coalition armor, but it looked different on his smaller frame compared to the hulking aliens around him. The Coalition had accepted humanity into their ranks only recently, after Earth had proven itself by repelling a swarm invasion. But among the warrior species of the galaxy, humans were seen as barely adequate soldiers. They lacked the strength of Krillians, the speed of voidwalkers, the durability of crystallines, or the psychic abilities of the Mentari. "Yesterday, during target practice," Zartek continued, his voice carrying across the mess hall, "the human fired 10 rounds. 10. And each shot took him several seconds to line up. Meanwhile, I discharged over 300 plasma bolts from my quad cannons in the same time frame." "Quantity over quality, perhaps?" suggested Kavara, a Mentari whose telepathic abilities made her an excellent scout. Her blue skin shimmered as she spoke. "Though I doubt it. Humans simply lack our evolutionary advantages. They compensate with technology and tactics, but individual prowess, negligible." Captain Vextor, a veteran Saurian commander with scarred green scales, entered the mess hall. His reptilian eyes swept the room before settling on Chen. "Soldiers, we have a situation. Long-range scanners have detected a swarm hive ship approaching this system. Estimated arrival, 36 hours. The jovial atmosphere evaporated instantly. The swarm represented the greatest threat to galactic civilization. Their bioships consumed entire planets, converting all organic matter into more swarm units. Every soldier present had lost friends, families, or entire worlds to their relentless advance. "Battle stations will be assigned within the hour," Vextor continued. "This is a Class 7 hive ship. Expect heavy resistance." His gaze lingered on Chen. "All soldiers will participate, no exceptions." As Vextor left, nervous energy replaced the earlier mockery. Zartek flexed his forearms. "Finally, real combat. Time to show what Krillian warriors can do." "The swarm won't know what hit them," Thixar agreed, his fangs extending in anticipation. "My venom can dissolve their chitin armor in seconds." Chen stood quietly, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. He walked past their table without a word, heading for the door. "Where are you going, human?" Grix called out. "Scared already?" Chen paused at the doorway, turning slightly. "Preparing," he said simply, his voice quiet but clear. Then he was gone. The aliens exchanged amused glances. "Preparing," Zartek mimicked. "What's he going to do? Polish his rifle some more?" Over the next day, The base transformed into a fortress. Energy shields hummed to life, plasma cannons swiveled skyward, and soldiers checked their weapons and armor. The approaching hive ship appeared on long-range sensors, a massive organic construct the size of a small moon, surrounded by clouds of smaller biofighters. Chen spent those hours differently than his squad mates. While they gathered in groups, boasting about their combat prowess and the number of swarm they'd kill, he studied topographical maps of the surrounding terrain. He analyzed wind patterns, calculated distances, and identified optimal firing positions. In the armory, while others grabbed the latest plasma weapons and energy shields, Chen selected specific ammunition types, armor-piercing rounds, incendiary bullets, and something the humans called Raufoss rounds, multi-purpose projectiles that combined armor penetration with explosive and incendiary effects. Quartermaster Yixnat, a six-limbed arachnid, watched with multiple eyes as Chen carefully inspected each round. "You know we have plasma weapons, yes? Much more efficient than those primitive bullets." Chen looked up briefly. Plasma weapons have a heat signature visible from orbit. They also create ozone, which swarm drones can detect from 2 kilometers away. The energy discharge creates electromagnetic interference that shows up on their biosensors. Yixnat's mandibles clicked in surprise. "And your weapon?" "Chemical propulsion, minimal heat signature, no energy discharge. Subsonic ammunition options that won't break the sound barrier." Chen loaded the rounds into specialized magazines. "Invisible until impact." The arachnid considered this. "But the rate of fire—" "One shot, one kill," Chen interrupted quietly. "Rate of fire becomes irrelevant." As Chen left the armory, Yixnat wondered if perhaps the other soldiers had misjudged the human. But then again, all soldiers claimed perfect accuracy before battle. Reality had a way of humbling such boasts. The night before the swarm's arrival, most soldiers stayed in the main compound, drawing strength from their comrades' presence. Chen disappeared into the wilderness surrounding the base, carrying his rifle and a pack of supplies. When dawn broke, he was nowhere to be found. "The human fled," Zartek announced at morning briefing. "I knew his kind couldn't handle real pressure." "Cowardice," Thixar hissed. "Should we send a patrol to drag him back?" Captain Vextor studied a tactical display showing the approaching swarm fleet. "Negative. We don't have soldiers to spare on deserters. If the human ran, he's the swarm's problem now." But Chen hadn't run. 5 kilometers from the base, he lay motionless beneath adaptive camouflage netting, his rifle positioned on a natural rock formation that provided clear sight lines across the valley. He'd been in position for 6 hours, controlling his breathing, minimizing movement, becoming part of the landscape itself. Through his scope, he watched the horizon. His rifle, a human-designed anti-materiel weapon, was indeed primitive by galactic standards, but it was also reliable, accurate, and most importantly, undetectable by swarm biosensors until the moment of impact. The first swarm drop pods began falling from the sky like deadly rain. Organic capsules burst open upon impact, disgorging warrior drones, horrific amalgamations of chitin, claw, and bio-engineered weapons. The base's defenses opened fire immediately, filling the air with plasma bolts and energy beams. Chen remained still, watching through his scope as the battle unfolded. He identified priority targets, synapse creatures that coordinated drone movements, heavy warrior forms that could breach the base's walls, and bio-artillery units setting up positions. His finger rested lightly on the trigger guard. Not yet. Patience was the sniper's greatest virtue. Let the enemy commit, reveal their positions, establish patterns. At the base, coalition forces engaged the swarm with typical galactic warfare tactics: overwhelming firepower, energy shields, and direct confrontation. Zartek's quad cannons blazed continuously, mowing down waves of smaller drones. Thixar darted between enemies, his venom dropping warrior forms. Grix's light beams cut through chitin armor like paper. "Where's the human?" someone shouted over the combat network. "Probably hiding under a rock." If they had checked their tactical displays more carefully, they might have noticed something odd. Swarm synapse creatures, the neural nodes that coordinated drone attacks, were suffering catastrophic head wounds. But in the chaos of battle, with hundreds of plasma bolts and energy beams filling the air, who could say which weapon scored? Which kill? Chen squeezed his trigger for the first time. The rifle, despite its .50 caliber round, made surprisingly little noise thanks to the advanced suppressor, another primitive human invention. A synapse creature 800 meters away suddenly collapsed. Its brain case exploded by a Raufoss round. The drones it commanded faltered, their coordination breaking down. He worked the bolt action smoothly, ejecting the spent case and chambering another round. Through his scope, he acquired another target. Squeeze. Another synapse creature down. The attacking wave began to lose cohesion. Back at the base, Kavara's telepathic senses detected something strange. The swarm's hive mind. It's fragmenting in Sector 7. Their coordination is breaking down. "My kills!" Zartek roared, spraying more plasma fire. "I'm devastating their ranks!" But Chen knew better. Each shot was calculated, each target chosen for maximum effect. Synapse creatures first, then heavy warriors threatening the walls. Bioartillery units setting up for bombardment. Command forms trying to rally broken attacks. One by one, methodically, he eliminated key targets that held swarm attacks together. The battle raged for hours. Coalition forces fought valiantly, their energy weapons creating a light show visible from orbit. But slowly, they began to notice patterns. Swarm attacks that should have overwhelmed certain sectors collapsed before reaching the walls. Enemy artillery units exploded before firing. Commander forms died mid-coordination. "Something's wrong with their tactics," Captain Vextor observed. "They're not adapting like usual. It's as if their command structure is being systematically eliminated," Kavara finished, her psychic senses detecting the gaps in the hive mind network. "But our fire is too dispersed to account for this level of precision." Chen shifted position after every few shots, maintaining concealment while acquiring new angles. His ammunition selection proved crucial. Armor-piercing rounds for heavily armored targets, incendiary for bioartillery units filled with volatile chemicals, standard rounds for exposed synapse creatures. As the sun reached its zenith, the swarm attack began to genuinely falter. Without proper coordination, warrior drones attacked in unorganized waves, easily repulsed by the base's defenses. The careful, adaptive tactics that made the swarm so dangerous devolved into mindless charges. "We're winning!" Grix announced, his crystalline form glowing with exertion. "They're in full retreat!" Indeed, surviving swarm units began pulling back, their assault broken. Coalition soldiers cheered, congratulating each other on their prowess. Kill counts were compared, with each soldier claiming dozens of drone kills. "I counted at least 200 from my quad cannons," Zartek boasted. 150 with my venom strikes, Thixar added. "Energy beams, maximum efficiency, 300 confirmed," Grix stated. As they celebrated, Chen finally moved from his position. He'd been still for so long that his joints protested, but he ignored the discomfort. Carefully, he packed up his equipment and began the trek back to base. The battle was won, but the hive ship remained in orbit. There would be more attacks. He arrived at the base as the sun set, slipping through the gates quietly. Other soldiers were still celebrating, comparing their performance and arguing over who had the highest kill count. Chen went straight to the armory to clean his rifle and replenish ammunition. "You!" Zartek's voice boomed across the armory. "Where were you, coward? We won the battle without you!" Chen looked up from his weapon maintenance. "I was where I needed to be." "Hiding, you mean?" Thixar sneered. While real warriors fought and died, you cowered in the wilderness. Did anyone die? Chen asked quietly. The question caught them off guard. Grix processed the query. No, actually. We suffered no casualties. Unusual for a swarm assault of this magnitude. Lucky, Zartek dismissed. Our superior firepower kept them at bay. Chen nodded, returning to his rifle. If you say so. Kavara studied the human with her telepathic senses, but found his mind frustratingly disciplined, revealing nothing. There was something about the day's battle that nagged at her, patterns in the swarm's collapse that didn't match the chaos of normal combat. That night, as Chen sat alone cleaning his rifle, again, the other soldiers continued their mockery, though perhaps with slightly less enthusiasm. The human had supposedly fled yet returned after the battle. A coward, certainly, but at least he hadn't completely deserted. Tomorrow they'll attack again, Captain Vextor announced during evening briefing. The hive ship is repositioning, likely preparing a larger assault. Rest well tonight. As soldiers dispersed to their quarters, Chen approached the captain privately. Request permission to establish forward observation post, grid reference 77 Alpha. Vextor's reptilian eyes narrowed. That's 5 kilometers into the wilderness. Why? Optimal sight lines, early warning capability, tactical advantage. The captain considered. The human had fled today, but perhaps he could serve as an early warning system. Granted. Try not to run too far this time. Chen saluted and left without another word. He had preparations to make, ammunition to select, positions to scout. Tomorrow's battle would be harder. The swarm would adapt, send larger forces, employ different tactics. But they would still need commanders, coordinators, and specialized units. And Chen would be waiting. The second dawn brought an ominous sight. The swarm hive ship had descended into lower orbit, its massive bioform blotting out a portion of the sky. Organic drop pods fell like a deadly blizzard, 10 times more than the previous day. This wasn't a probing attack anymore. This was a full invasion. Chen had been in position since midnight, having identified 3 different firing positions he could move between. His body was covered in local mud and vegetation, breaking up his outline. The adaptive camouflage netting had been carefully arranged to mimic natural formations. To any observer, he was just another part of the rocky terrain. Through his scope's night vision, he'd watched the swarm establish forward positions under cover of darkness. They were learning, adapting to yesterday's defeat. Bioforms dug trenches with acid secretions, creating defensive positions for their artillery units. Warrior drones gathered in larger packs, protected by heavy assault forms with redundant neural systems. Back at the base, alarms screamed as soldiers scrambled to defensive positions. The tactical display showed an overwhelming red tide approaching from 3 directions. By the void, Captain Vextor breathed. They're sending everything. Impossible odds, Grix calculated, his crystalline form flickering with anxiety. Their numbers exceed ours by a factor of 100 to 1. Then we'll die as warriors, Zartek roared, checking his quad cannons. Let them come! But Kavara noticed something on the tactical display. Wait, the human's position beacon, he's still out there. Fool probably fell asleep, Thixar hissed. He'll be overrun in minutes. Chen, however, was very much awake. He'd already identified the swarm's command hierarchy for this assault. They'd adapted, yes, but adaptation had patterns. The synapse creatures now moved with bodyguards. Heavy warriors had redundant neural tissue. But there were still vulnerabilities. He noticed the swarm had created a new unit type, shielded command nodes that generated bioelectric fields to protect key creatures. Interesting. The rifle's chemical propulsion wouldn't be affected by electromagnetic shielding, unlike plasma weapons. The first wave hit the base's outer defenses like a tsunami, Energy weapons lit up the morning sky as coalition forces opened fire. The defensive positions erupted in controlled chaos as soldiers fought desperately against the endless tide. Chen took his first shot of the day. A shielded command node 1,200 meters away. Extreme range, even for his rifle. He'd calculated wind speed, elevation, even the Coriolis effect from the planet's rotation. The specialized armor-piercing round punched through the bioelectric field and the creature's armor, detonating inside its neural cavity. Immediately, a section of the swarm advance faltered. The shield protecting dozens of synapse creatures flickered and died. Coalition plasma fire, previously ineffective against the shielding, suddenly found targets. "Sector 3 shield is down!" someone shouted over comms. "Pour it on!" Chen was already acquiring his next target. The swarm had created mobile spawning units, grotesque creatures that could produce warrior drones mid-battle. Destroying these would limit enemy reinforcements. He selected an incendiary round, aimed for the spawner's volatile biosacs, and fired. The explosion was spectacular. The spawning unit erupted in a chain reaction, its volatile organic compounds creating a fireball that consumed dozens of nearby drones. More importantly, the psychological effect on surrounding swarm units was immediate. They hesitated, their hive mind processing this unexpected threat. At the base, Zartek laughed as his plasma cannons tore through suddenly vulnerable enemies. "Their shields are failing! Krillian superiority!" But Chen knew the truth. Each shield generator he eliminated opened windows for the base's energy weapons. He was turning their massed firepower from ineffective to devastating, one precise shot at a time. The swarm adapted again, spreading their command units wider, making them harder to target. So Chen adapted too. He began targeting bioartillery units just as they prepared to fire. The timing was crucial. Wait until they'd charge their organic weapons with volatile chemicals, then strike. The resulting explosions took out not just the artillery, but surrounding units. Hours passed. Chen moved between positions, never firing more than 3 shots from any location. The swarm sent hunter-killer units into the wilderness, searching for threats, but they looked for energy signatures, heat blooms, electromagnetic emissions. They passed within meters of his positions, their biosensors detecting nothing. Inside the base, exhaustion began to set in. Energy weapons overheated, requiring cooling cycles. Soldiers rotated positions, grabbing nutrients and hydration between waves. Yet somehow, miraculously, they held. "How are we surviving this?" Kavara wondered aloud, her telepathic senses overwhelmed by the psychic static of dying swarm. "Their attacks keep failing at crucial moments." "Superior coalition tactics," Grix stated, though his certainty wavered. He'd analyzed the battle flow, and something didn't add up. The swarm's failures were too consistent, too precisely timed. As noon approached, Chen noticed a new development. The hive ship was deploying its ultimate ground unit, a Patriarch. These massive bioforms stood 30 meters tall, protected by overlapping armor plates and redundant organ systems. They coordinated entire battlefields, their powerful psychic presence binding lesser swarm into perfectly coordinated armies. The Patriarch landed 5 kilometers from the base, immediately beginning to organize the chaotic swarm forces into a coherent assault. Within minutes, the disorganized attacks transformed into precise, coordinated strikes. "Patriarch on the field," Captain Vextor announced. "All heavy weapons, concentrate fire." But the Patriarch was beyond effective range of the base's weapons, and its escort of heavy warriors made direct assault suicide. Coalition forces could only watch as it turned the tide of battle. Chen studied the massive creature through his scope. Its armor was too thick for even his specialized rounds, but he'd learned something about the swarm. They were ultimately biological, and biological creatures had requirements. he noticed the Patriarch's feeding tendrils, massive organic tubes that connected to spawning units, drawing nutrients to fuel its massive form. The tendrils themselves were armored, but the connection points... Chen loaded a magazine of Raufoss rounds and began a careful sequence of shots. Not at the Patriarch itself, but at the vulnerable connection points where feeding tendrils met spawning units. Each severed connection forced the Patriarch to redirect energy to healing, weakening its psychic coordination. The effect was subtle at first. Swarm attacks became slightly less coordinated. Timing between waves grew erratic. The perfect harmony of the hive mind developed discordant notes. "The Patriarch's weakening!" Kavara announced, her psychic senses detecting the creature's distress. "Its control is fragmenting." "Impossible," Thixar argued. "Nothing we've fired has even reached it." But Chen continued his methodical work. When the Patriarch adapted, growing new feeding connections, he targeted the spawning units themselves, forcing the creature to expend more energy seeking nutrients. When hunter-killers got too close to his position, he displaced, set up elsewhere, and continued. By late afternoon, the Patriarch was visibly struggling. Its psychic emanations had become erratic, its movement sluggish. Swarm forces reflected their coordinator's weakness, attacks becoming increasingly disorganized. That's when Chen noticed the opportunity. The Patriarch, desperate for nutrients, had moved closer to the base to access fresh spawning units. It was now barely within extreme rifle range, 2,000 meters, at the very edge of what his weapon could achieve. But the creature's head was too well armored, its vital organs too protected. Chen needed something else. He studied the beast through his scope, looking for any vulnerability. Then he saw it. The psychic amplifier organ, a specialized growth on the Patriarch's skull that boosted its hive-mind connection. The organ itself was armored, but the neural channel feeding it. Chen loaded his last specialized round, an experimental anti-materiel bullet with a tungsten core designed to penetrate the armor of human tanks. He'd been saving it for an emergency. This qualified. The shot would be nearly impossible. 2,000 meters, crosswind, moving target, and he had to hit a neural channel no wider than his fist. Chen controlled his breathing, felt his heartbeat, became one with the rifle. Between heartbeats, in the moment of absolute stillness, he squeezed the trigger. The round flew true, punching through air and armor alike. It found the neural channel, severing the Patriarch's connection to its psychic amplifier. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The creature's psychic scream shattered the hive-mind network across the entire battlefield. Swarm units froze, their connection to higher consciousness severed. Warriors turned on each other in confusion. Synapse creatures writhed in agony. The perfectly coordinated army devolved into mindless beasts. "Now!" Captain Vextor roared. "All units advance! Drive them back!" Coalition forces surged from the base, energy weapons blazing. Without coordination, the swarm crumbled. Zartek's quad cannons carved through warrior packs. Thixar's venom dropped confused creatures by the dozen. Grix's light beams swept across the battlefield like deadly sunshine. The Patriarch, its psychic abilities crippled, tried to retreat, but without its amplifier, it couldn't coordinate an orderly withdrawal. Coalition heavy weapons, finally in range, poured fire into the wounded beast. It collapsed less than a kilometer from the base, its death scream signaling the end of organized resistance. As sunset approached, the battlefield fell silent except for sporadic mop-up operations. The impossible had happened. They'd survived, even triumphed against overwhelming odds. Chen made his way back to base as darkness fell, rifle slung over his shoulder. He'd fired 43 rounds over the course of the day, 43 rounds that had systematically dismantled an army. He found the other soldiers in the mess hall, exhausted but exhilarated. Kill counts were being tallied with great enthusiasm. 500 drones with my cannons, Zartek boasted. A new record! 300 with venom strikes, Thixar added, plus 2 heavy warriors. Precision light beam kills, 417, Grix calculated. Maximum efficiency maintained throughout engagement. Chen quietly entered the armory, beginning his post-battle ritual of cleaning and maintenance. Quartermaster Yixnat watched him with interest. "How many rounds fired, human?" 43, Chen replied, disassembling his rifle. 43 kills, then? Chen looked up. 43 shots. The arachnid's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "And the difference?" "Some shots affected multiple targets," Chen said simply, returning to his maintenance. Yixnat considered this. The human's ammunition requisition had been minimal compared to the thousands of energy cells used by other soldiers. Yet something about the day's battle nagged at the quartermaster. The way swarm attacks had collapsed at crucial moments, the miraculous failure of their coordination. That evening, Captain Vextor addressed the assembled soldiers. "Outstanding work today. Against impossible odds, we held. The hive ship is retreating to high orbit, likely preparing for a final assault. Intelligence suggests they'll commit everything tomorrow, including aerial units." Groans echoed through the hall. Aerial swarm units were particularly deadly, able to bypass ground defenses and attack from above. "Rest well tonight," Vextor continued. "Tomorrow we finish this." As soldiers dispersed, Chen approached the captain again. "Request permission for forward position. Grid reference 92 Bravo. Elevated terrain." "That's on the mountain ridge," Vextor noted. 7 kilometers out. You'll be completely isolated if they detect you." "Optimal elevation for aerial engagement," Chen replied. "Clear sight lines to approach vectors." The captain studied the human. Twice now he'd been in the field during major engagements. Twice they'd achieved impossible victories. Correlation or causation? "Granted. Whatever you're doing out there, keep doing it." Chen saluted and departed. In the mess hall, the mockery had taken on a different tone. "The human and his primitive rifle," Zartek laughed, but it seemed forced. 43 shots. I fire that many in a second." "At least he returned this time," Kavara noted thoughtfully. "Both days he was out there during the worst fighting." "Hiding," Thixar insisted. "While we fought, he hid." But doubt crept into their voices. The human's behavior was strange, yes, but so were their miraculous victories. Still, what could one primitive rifle do against the swarm? Their weapons were designed for massed fire, overwhelming force. Surely that was what won battles. Chen spent the night preparing for the final engagement. He studied aerial swarm units, identifying weak points in their bioengineered flying forms, wing joints, sensory clusters, the biological turbines that kept them aloft, all potential targets. He selected specialty ammunition, armor-piercing for hardened flyers, incendiary for the volatile gas-filled scouts, and something special he'd been saving, high-explosive dual-purpose rounds designed to fragment in flight, creating clouds of shrapnel. As his fellow soldiers slept, Chen made the long trek to his chosen position. The mountain ridge provided perfect elevation, with multiple fallback positions and natural concealment. He settled in as the first stars appeared, beginning his long vigil. Through his night scope, he could see the hive ship's silhouette against the stars. Bioforms moved across its surface, final preparations for tomorrow's assault. They would come with everything: ground units, aerial swarms, even orbital bombardment. But they would still need coordination. They would still need commanders. They would still have vulnerabilities that a patient, skilled marksman could exploit. Chen checked his ammunition one final time, then settled into his shooting position. Tomorrow would decide the fate of Kepler 442b. The other soldiers would bring their energy weapons, their strength, their speed, their courage. And Chen would bring his rifle, his patience, and the one thing the mocking soldiers hadn't considered: the human gift for finding the perfect shot at the perfect moment, turning the tide of battle one precise trigger, pull at a time. The third dawn arrived with an apocalyptic sky. The swarm hive ship had descended to its lowest orbit yet, its massive bioform stretching across the horizon like a cancerous moon. But this time, something was different. The ship itself was opening, revealing internal chambers that writhed with activity. Chen observed through his scope as massive aerial bioforms emerged, sky leviathans, each the size of a coalition transport ship. Their gas-filled bodies allowed them to float effortlessly, while biojet organs provided propulsion. Worse, their undersides bristled with acid spray organs that could dissolve entire city blocks. Smaller flyers emerged in clouds, shriekers with their sonic attacks, spore carriers that could seed new swarm colonies, and thousands of hunter-killers designed to overwhelm aerial defenses. This wasn't just an assault. This was an extinction event. At the coalition base, panic threatened to overwhelm discipline. The tactical display showed the impossibility of their situation. Aerial units approaching from every direction, ground forces massing for synchronized assault, and energy readings suggesting the hive ship itself was charging some form of orbital bombardment capability. "We need to evacuate," Grix calculated, his crystalline form flickering rapidly. "Mathematical probability of survival, 0.03%. "We stand and fight," Captain Vextor commanded, though his voice carried the weight of a death sentence. "If we fall here, the colony behind us falls. 5 million civilians counting on us." Zartek checked his quad cannons one last time. "Then we make them pay for every meter. Krillian warriors don't run." "Alert," Kavara announced, her psychic senses reeling. "The hive mind? It's stronger than ever. They've created some kind of neural amplification network. Every unit is connected, sharing sensory data in real time. They'll adapt to our tactics instantly." From his mountain perch, Chen had noticed the same thing. The swarm had learned from yesterday's defeat. The neural network was distributed across dozens of aerial synapse creatures, each protected by formations of fighters. Destroying one or two wouldn't collapse the network. But Chen had learned too. He'd spent the night calculating trajectories, wind patterns at various altitudes, and the precise vulnerabilities of aerial bioforms. More importantly, he'd identified the network's critical weakness, the compression points where data flowed between aerial and ground units. The first Sky Leviathan approached the base, floating majestically above effective plasma range. Its acid spray organs began secreting their deadly payload. In moments, it would rain destruction on the coalition defenses. Chen fired his first shot of the day, not at the Leviathan. Its gas bladders were too well protected, but at a much smaller target. A neural relay creature hovering near the Leviathan's sensory cluster, responsible for coordinating the attack run. The creature exploded, severing the Leviathan's connection to the hive network. Suddenly blind to tactical data, the massive bioform continued its approach based on last known information, directly into a crosswind Chen had been tracking. The wind pushed the creature off course, its acid spray falling harmlessly into empty terrain. "The Leviathan missed," someone shouted. "It completely missed the base." "Lucky wind," Thixar hissed, though he sounded uncertain. Chen was already tracking his next target. Shrieker formations approached in perfect synchronization, preparing their sonic attack. He identified the formation leader, slightly larger with enhanced neural tissue for coordinating the acoustic harmonics. The high-explosive dual-purpose round fragmented 50 meters from the formation, creating a cloud of hypersonic shrapnel. The formation leader and several nearby shriekers were shredded. Without coordination, the remaining creature's sonic attacks produced discordant noise rather than the devastating focused beam they'd intended. "Their sonic attack failed," Zartek roared. "My quad cannons must be disrupting their frequencies." But Kavara was beginning to sense a pattern. Each swarm failure coincided with the distant crack of a chemical projectile weapon. Her telepathic senses, stretched to their limits, detected something else: precise termination of specific neural signals within the hive network. The battle intensified. Coalition forces fought desperately as swarm units pressed from all directions. Energy weapons overheated. Shields failed and ammunition ran low. Yet somehow, miraculously, they held. Every coordinated swarm attack developed critical failures at crucial moments. Sky Leviathans approached in formation, only to have their sensory clusters destroyed, sending them careening into each other. Spore carriers, preparing to release their deadly payload, spontaneously combusted, their volatile contents ignited by incendiary rounds. Hunter-killer swarms lost their pack leaders, devolving into chaotic clouds that coalition fighters could handle. Chen worked with mechanical precision. His 3 positions gave him overlapping fields of fire, allowing him to cover all approach vectors. He prioritized targets based on threat level and vulnerability windows. When the swarm adapted, he adapted faster. They tried overwhelming him with numbers. He switched to fragmentation rounds that could disable multiple flyers. They tried armor plating on synapse creatures. He used armor-piercing rounds with delayed fuses. They tried decoy formations. He identified real threats by their neural emission patterns, visible through his scope's specialized filters. Midday brought the crisis point. The hive ship's orbital weapon reached full charge. A bioplasma beam capable of vaporizing the entire base. Energy readings spiked as the weapon prepared to fire. "Incoming orbital strike!" Captain Vextor announced. "All units, take cover!" But Chen had been waiting for this. He'd observed the hive ship's charging cycle, noticed the correlation with specific aerial units. Bioenergy collected by Sky Leviathans was being channeled back to the ship through living conduits, specialized flyers that formed a chain from atmosphere to orbit. He'd saved 3 rounds specifically for this moment, 3 shots to break a chain that would save everyone below. The first round took out a conduit creature at 2,000 meters altitude. Bioenergy backlashed, electrocuting nearby units. The second round hit another conduit attempting to compensate, creating another cascade failure. The third and final round struck the primary collection node just as it reached critical capacity. The explosion was visible from the base. A chain reaction of bioenergy erupted through the conduit network, racing back toward the hive ship. The orbital weapon, overloaded with uncontrolled energy, exploded while still attached to the ship. Secondary explosions rippled across the biovessel's surface. "The hive ship!" Grix's sensors went wild. "It's suffering catastrophic damage. Their orbital weapon has been destroyed." The Piskic death scream of the wounded hive ship shattered the neural network binding the swarm forces. Aerial units plummeted from the sky as their coordination collapsed. Ground forces froze in confusion. The perfect harmony of the hive mind became a cacophony of conflicting signals. "Attack!" Captain Vextor commanded. "All units, maximum offensive, drive them back!" Coalition forces surged forward, energy weapons blazing. Without coordination, the swarm crumbled. Zartek's quad cannons carved through confused warriors. Thixar's venom dropped synapse creatures trying desperately to restore order. Grix's light beams swept across the battlefield in brilliant arcs. From his position, Chen continued his methodical work. Surviving synapse creatures attempting to rebuild the network were eliminated before they could establish connections. Command forms trying to rally ground forces found themselves with fatal head wounds. Even as the swarm retreated, he ensured they couldn't regroup. By sunset, it was over. The hive ship, mortally wounded, limped toward the system's edge. Scattered swarm units fled in complete disarray. The impossible had been achieved. A single coalition base had broken an entire swarm invasion. Chen made his final trek back to base as stars appeared overhead. His rifle was hot from sustained fire, his ammunition exhausted. 131 rounds fired over 3 days. 131 shots that had systematically dismantled an invasion force of millions. The base was in chaos when he arrived. Celebrations mixed with disbelief. Soldiers compared kill counts that ran into the thousands. Energy weapon batteries lay depleted. The ground was littered with swarm corpses. But in the command center, Captain Vextor and Kavara were reviewing battle recordings with growing amazement. Computer. Overlay temporal analysis of swarm command terminations with acoustic signatures, Vextor ordered. The display revealed the truth. Every critical swarm failure, every breakdown in coordination, every miraculous survival coincided with the sound signature of a chemical projectile weapon. 131 shots mapped perfectly onto 131 decisive moments that had turned the tide of battle. By the void, Kavara whispered. The human. He was performing neural surgery on their entire army, each shot calculated to collapse specific command structures at precisely the right moment. Calculate effective combat multiplier, Vextor commanded the computer. The numbers appeared, staggering in their implication. By eliminating key targets, Chen's actions had resulted in the deaths of approximately 4 million swarm units. Not through direct fire, but through the cascade failures his precision shots created. 4 million, Vextor breathed. 1 soldier, 1 primitive rifle, 4 million enemy casualties. They found Chen in his usual spot, quietly cleaning his rifle in the armory. The other soldiers were still celebrating in the mess hall, unaware of the revelation in the command center. Soldier Chen, Captain Vextor approached, Kavara beside him. We need to discuss your performance. Chen looked up briefly, then returned to his maintenance. Sir? Your kill count, Kavara said softly. We've analyzed the battle recordings. 43 rounds first day, 47 the second, 41 today, Chen recited. 131 total. That's not what we mean, Vextor clarified. Your effective kill count, the cascade failures from your target selection. Chen paused in his cleaning. I don't count drones, sir. Only shots fired. 4 million, Kavara stated. Your actions resulted in 4 million enemy terminations. For the first time, Chen showed emotion, a slight widening of his eyes. That seems high. Your targeting of synapse creatures created command failures that led to millions of drones becoming non-functional or turning on each other, Vextor explained. Every shot was precisely calculated for maximum strategic impact. Chen resumed cleaning his rifle. I engaged priority targets as they presented themselves. Standard sniper doctrine. Standard. Kavara laughed, slightly hysterical. You call collapsing an entire invasion standard? With respect, ma'am, the credit belongs to all coalition forces. I simply created opportunities. The base defenses did the actual fighting. Vextor studied the human with new respect. Why didn't you say anything? The others mock you daily for your primitive weapon and tactics. Chen shrugged slightly. Words are just words, sir. Results speak louder. Besides, it's easier to work when no one's paying attention to you. We need to inform the others. They should know what you've accomplished. I'd prefer you didn't, sir. Kavara was astounded. You don't want recognition? Glory? Your name would be legend. Chen looked up from his rifle, meeting their eyes. I'm a sniper, ma'am. We work best from the shadows. Let them think their plasma cannons won the day. They fought bravely and deserve their glory. I'm just support. Support that saved the entire colony, Vextor pointed out. Every soldier contributed, sir. I just contributed differently. Chen finished reassembling his rifle. Permission to be dismissed. I need to requisition more ammunition, just in case. Vextor nodded slowly. Granted. And Chen? Thank you. The human gave a slight nod and departed. Kavara watched him go with amazement. 4 million kills, and he acts like he just did basic maintenance. Humans. Vextor mused. We mock them for their lack of inherent advantages. No strength, speed, or psychic abilities. But perhaps that's exactly why they develop such terrifying precision. When you can't overwhelm with force, you learn to place every shot perfectly. Word of Chen's true contribution eventually leaked, as such things do. The video analysis was undeniable. One human with one rifle had orchestrated the defeat of an entire swarm invasion. The mockery in the mess hall ceased, replaced by a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Zartek approached Chen one evening, all 4 arms gesturing nervously. Human. Chen, about what we said. The mockery. Chen looked up from his rifle. What mockery? Your weapon. We called it primitive. It is primitive, Chen agreed. Chemical propulsion is ancient technology. But 4 million... The weapon is just a tool, Chen interrupted gently. What matters is knowing when and where to use it. Your quad cannons killed thousands of drones, essential for holding the line. My rifle eliminated key targets. Different tools, different purposes, both necessary. Thixar joined them, unusually subdued. You could have said something. When we laughed at you? Why? You weren't wrong. My rate of fire is laughable compared to your weapons. I can't match your venom's lethality in close combat. Grix's light beams are far more efficient for mass targets. Chen resumed cleaning his weapon. But efficiency isn't everything. Sometimes one perfect shot matters more than 1,000 random ones. Will you teach us? Kavara asked, having drifted over. This precision warfare? Chen considered. Sniping isn't about the weapon or even marksmanship. It's about patience, observation, and understanding. Seeing the whole battlefield while focusing on one critical point. Most species prefer direct action. It's more satisfying, more glorious. Sitting still for hours, waiting for one perfect moment, that's harder than any firefight. Humans excel at this? Grix inquired. His crystalline form shifted to match Chen's seated position. Some do. We had to. On Earth, before we reached the stars, we were prey animals that became predators. No claws, fangs, or natural weapons. We learned to hunt from distance, to think ahead, to turn patience into a weapon. Chen held up a round, examining it in the light. One shot, one kill. Because for most of our history, we rarely got a second chance. The coalition base on Kepler 442b became a legend, the place where impossible odds were overcome. Military academies across the galaxy studied the battle, trying to understand how a single installation held against such overwhelming force. But in the mess hall, things returned to a new normal. Chen still sat alone, still cleaned his rifle with methodical precision. The difference was the respect in his fellow soldiers' eyes. They'd learned something important about humanity, about the danger of judging by appearances. Months later, when the swarm threatened another world, the coalition assembled its finest warriors, Zartek with his quad cannons, Thixar with his venom, Grix with his light beams. And among them, specifically requested, was a quiet human with an ancient rifle. As they prepared for deployment, Zartek asked, Chen, what's your plan for this battle? Chen checked his ammunition supply, running calculations in his head. Same as always. Find a good position, identify critical targets, wait for the perfect moment. He looked up at his alien comrades. And create opportunities for you to be heroes. We know the truth now, Kavara said. You're the real hero. No, Chen disagreed, slinging his rifle. We're all soldiers doing our jobs. Mine just happens to be quieter. As their transport lifted off, heading toward another impossible battle, the coalition forces felt a confidence they hadn't known before. They had their energy weapons, their natural advantages, their courage and strength. and they had a human sniper with a primitive rifle who could turn one bullet into 4 million casualties. The galaxy had learned to fear the swarm. But now the swarm would learn to fear something else: the patient, precise, impossibly lethal touch of humanity's ancient art of marksmanship. One shot, one kill, multiplied by the terrifying mathematics of strategic precision. In the end, the silent human sniper proved that in warfare, as in many things, it wasn't about how much firepower you had or how fast you could deliver it. It was about putting exactly the right amount of force in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. And no species in the galaxy did that better than the humans.